thanks everybody for coming. Summer pruning, right class, right day. All right. Get our pruning weapons out here and go to work when we get home. All right, it's not too bad. So I'm Trevor, our general manager here. I appreciate you coming. We do record this. You're not on camera, so don't worry. It's just me stuck on YouTube here after class. We post it. If you're not bored after the class, you can go back and watch it again on YouTube, right? So we'll have plenty of time for questions. I'm hoping everybody brought some plants in they want to ask about. What do I do with this? What do I do with that? We could do plenty of time for that at the end. I'm going to show you some of my favorite weapons, I call them. I'll show you a few plants. I collected assorted branches from my yard last night and this morning. Sorry about that, plants, but we will hopefully show you a couple of little demonstrations too. So I think what we'll do is we'll whip through some slides first, and then I'll grab some plants and kind of show you a couple things. So if we talk about you know, devices, weapons, pruners, whatever you want to call them, there's some really good ones out there. I have huge hands, so what works for me may not work for you. So we got lots of choices. Sometimes a little smaller, a little bigger hands, a little easier to use. You got leverage, you don't need leverage. There's all kinds of good pruning devices we can grab for our yard. I'm going to show you a couple of my favorites here. If we kind of get a basic bypass pruner, what I always have in my holster at work, just a simple little bypass pruner, forged, easy to use. We have left hand, we got right hand, we got ones with the swivel hand, so if you've got issues with wrist and it's kind of hard to crimp down, this actually rolls and it kind of helps with a little bit of carpal tunnel type issues. So we've got some options for hand pruners, but that would always be weapon number one to me. The most useful thing in my yard I use for probably too many things, including popping a weed out from time to time too, but I didn't say that. Ratchet pruners on the right there, sometimes that's a great option for folks. We carry a very inexpensive pair. That one's got an easy lock, and instead of having to go like this again, I go click, 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 and I can sever it, so I don't have as much, maybe again, tension. My mother, bless her heart's 82 and still gardens probably 8 hours a day, and she's retired now. And these are the kinds of things I've gotten her over the years to make life a little bit easier. So ratchet pruner. We can always use a good pair of loppers. You know, you can see the big loppers. This is, to me, is a much more useful one, maybe than the tall version. They're both good tools. Sometimes with large loppers, you've got a tough time getting in to get a really sharp angle on it. But we do all aluminum. This is the #1 sold device at professional places. So if I'm growing fruit, I'm a grower, this is the kind of stuff they're buying. So this will last you a lifetime. You don't get it in the yard waste container. Hopefully the blue handle will remind you not to throw it in there. But very lightweight aluminum, very useful, very strong. So those are the giant ones. I tend to use these more at my place. We call these vine loppers or mini loppers. Again, I don't need as much leverage and a little easier to get in to tight spaces where I can get a good clean cut and not have to worry about, again, leaving a lot of stubs around. I brought one pole pruner in. This is the same one I have at my house. You know, this is an expensive piece of machinery. I think these are about a couple $100 for a high-end one now. I would always look for chain, not rope. That's the weak point of the pruner, and I do use this a lot at my place. And I haven't broken this in about 8 years now, and the rope ones was like every 2 years, buy another one, buy another one. So much better. I can extend this out to about 14 feet. So you got some little bit of strength and some leverage. That's one you can get a lot of your own trees by yourself and not maybe have to hire somebody to come down and do it for you. I don't keep the blade on mine, but it's very easy just to put the little saw blade on there, and then I can get up and do some larger limb sawing as well, not just lopping. But good pole pruner might be a choice for some gardeners, depending on how much pruning you're doing around. But if you keep it, again, safe in the garage, keep it oiled, keep it sharp, it should last you a lifetime if you buy a good quality one. Sometimes I'm looking for a good quality giraffe pruner. If you see that funky thing upside down with a little handle on it, that's like what some people call those long reach pruners. Sometimes I can get into a plant, you know, and not have to do this, but just click the handle once I get it in there with a little lopper blade. Most of the mechanisms I find on those are not very long lasting, so we're still looking for a better replacement. And that's the same pair. I brought some tools from my house. That's the same pair of hedge shears I have at my house. I use these a lot on my hedges, obviously, broadleaf stuff, a lot of plants. I like the fact I can click the handles and extend them out a little bit farther. Doesn't seem like much, but it helps, you know, to get up that extra little bit or get in that extra little bit. And again, very lightweight being aluminum, so nice and easy to use on those too. Now, probably the #1 thing people purchase is this. Who's got a sharpener already? Nice. You've been to the class before at some point. So I use this non-stop. This is mine from home. I have one on my desk at work. We probably have 6 for the staff to use. But this is the easiest thing ever for me to just pull out of my pocket, sharpen my blade real quick, and off we go. You know, good sharp pair of pruners is not going to mash my plants. So that's a really good, especially with the discount today, 20% off all the tools. You get these for like 12 bucks. That's a great little purchase. And even in the handle, I keep some 3-in-1 oil in my handle when I'm out working because it's got a little brush built on, and I can actually oil my stuff, particularly in the winter time if I'm out working and it's raining. So that's another little bonus on that too.
What's this oil? What kind of oil?
Well, 3-in-1 oil or any kind of lubricating oil. I use 3-in-1 oil usually for mine, but it's an easy thing to keep in the handle and have a little bit to kind of keep my blades fresh and the mechanisms easy. Yeah.
Is that the same as bar oil?
Bar chain oil is a little bit different. Yeah, a little bit different. That's for a chainsaw. A chainsaw on the stick, right?
Okay.
And then I use this more than anything. This is a simple little pocket saw. So we gotta be careful because they're sharp, but it closes up, comes in a little plastic holder I clip on my belt. But this, to me, is the ultimate surgical tool. If I don't want to get in with a lopper and I'm trying to get into old plants, I can get very accurate surgical cuts, large limbs, small limbs, anything you want. I can really get into a tight space with those and do a good job. So that, to me, would be the two. If you don't have those two, a must-have, I think, for all gardeners. Those are two really useful little tools that I use quite a bit. Now, if we just talk... Oh.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So, what do you think about the powered clippers?
I'm trying a pair right now. I'm a little worried that some people might get going a little fast and like accidentally cut something off they didn't want to, like a finger perhaps. I'm playing with one at home. I got a demo from our guy. I'll let you know here how it goes this summer because I'm going to play with them at my house and down at the Arboretum in Everett too. If I was doing a lot of something, I think it would be very useful. A lot of my growers use those, to be honest with you, because again, I'm not squeezing, I'm squeezing. As long as I'm good at aiming, I can just move it around and it does it for me. Most of them have rechargeable batteries. The one I'm looking at works with every DeWalt tool I have in my garage. I just swap the battery out, click it on there. The nicer ones are a couple $100. I mean, this isn't a cheap, you know, a little cheap tool to buy, but again, take care of it. I think it's something that can last you a lifetime. Yeah. We'll report back on that at the winter class because I'm playing with one this summer. So if we just talk types of pruning real quick, you know, we are in the summer season now, so we're getting into a little bit of pinching would be the first one. If I have annual flowers, perennial flowers, I'm trying to pinch things back, deadhead them, keep them tight, keep them blooming. That would be my first choice. Sometimes it's physically the fingers. I can use pruners. A lot of times even it's getting a good pair of little snips. Even my big hands use these all the time. This is what I use to walk around at deadhead annuals, perennials, that kind of thing here as we get into summer. But pinching them back is going to keep our annuals, perennials a little tighter, and the biggest thing to me, again, keep them blooming all through the summer, maximum flower power. Shearing is going to be easy. Everyone probably has hedge shears, right? So we got our little OCD boxwood hedge, we got whatever we want that we just want to shear back. I'm not going to take a Japanese holly like this or a boxwood and out there and spend 5 hours going, okay, I think I want a little piece there and a little piece here and a little piece there. I'm going to probably go, okay, let me just round you off or square you or whatever I'm going for. Maybe you like triangles in the yard, you can do it that way too. But we want to nip those back to, again, have a denser, fuller plant. Typically it's our hedges and some things like that. Maybe not a rhododendron, probably not a Japanese maple, although it's your yard, you can do what you like with it, right? So shearing back would be one. The biggest difference, I actually borrowed a piece of my boxwood this morning. Sorry, boxwood. But I'll get to shearing mine here literally in the next, like I'm home next weekend. I'll be probably doing this at my house next week, just like I'm telling you guys to get to going on it. So boxwood grows out. A lot of people have this. A lot of broadleafs like this. The difference is because the buds are so close on the stem, I don't have to sit here for an hour and go, okay, there's one there and one here. I could shear this off anywhere I want. I'm going to be so close to a bud, I'm not going to end up with a bunch of dead stubs. Does that kind of make sense? Other plants, we have gaps and we just don't want to probably head shear them. We're going to have not the prettiest plant when we're all done with that. So shearing, very easy. Thinning and heading back are two things we do a lot of in the winter, but also in the summer. You know, if you're trying to control something, get it to grow the way you want it to, maybe keep it a little smaller, those are useful tools on plant health. I'm going to step over here and borrowed a little maple branch from one of my maples this morning. So if I have this out here, again, and I pretended like I'm the trunk, right, and there's my limb kind of hitting off my tree, I thinned this branch. I took it all the way back to the trunk and I got it out of there. I looked up and said, oh, there's a little too many branches in here, and I pulled one out this morning, hey, to bring down to class to show you, but it's what we want to do in the summer. If I have a big, thick, bushy plant that's not getting a lot of light through for the garden underneath, thinning out some of those interior branches are really going to help with air circulation, with sun, less disease. I've got a happier plant, and I'm going to have a happier garden done underneath. So by thinning that out, hey, it was one that needed to go anyway, so don't think I butchered my tree for you. But I think that large of a branch is maybe an example where I can show you, by thinning this out, I took the whole branch out. Say I wanted to leave this on the tree, I could also either head this back a little bit if maybe it was getting too far out by the sidewalk, or there's other reasons we would do that. Or maybe I like the shape, the outline of the tree, but I want to open up these branches a little more and thin these out. So I can go, you know, I could go into the middle here, pick a few of these. Again, I'm not leaving stubs. I'm cutting all the way back to the trunk. I'm not leaving little pieces of wood, but I could open up that whole limb and change how thick that is by just thinning out a little piece here and there. Is that kind of making sense to everybody? If I did the opposite, and I'm like, okay, this is onto my neighbor's porch, the mailbox, whatever it is, and I'm like, I need to slow you down or change the direction, then I'm going to try to head this back. So I could go back and cut to a point like that, and instead of going straight out now I'm going to have my energy go a little bit more left and right. Is that kind of making sense? So I could head this back, you know, as far as I want. If I go along here and just do that, what's going to happen? I'm going to have a bunch of twigs and probably a dead stub, and it's not going to look the prettiest. So if you're going to take the time, cut back to where I've already got a branch started, I can keep going all the way back until we have nothing left. Now you're going to go, okay, I can tell you prune now. Once this leaf's out, I've shortened it up, I'm going to have a little growth, and I'm going to have that same nice natural shape I had before. Going along with the chainsaw and the stick, because I see it all the time in the yards, that is not pruning. Alright? That's plant butchery, we call that, so hopefully I don't offend anybody. But if I'm going to do that, then do what I did. Take the limb off at the trunk and be done with it, because that's not going to do you much good down the road, okay? Nobody got hit with any debris, right? We can keep it inside here. So thinning out, again, is getting me sun, getting me air, getting me a healthy plant, a natural plant, which I think is always my goal with pruning. The heading back, I can change the direction a little bit or slow it down. Now somebody's inevitably going to ask me about, what if I head back the top of my tree? Some things are not necessarily the end of the world. Fruit trees are fine. Maples don't really care about that, but I'm not going to have a beautiful conifer or a shade tree or something that has a central leader and top it. You've topped it for all eternity. So I really wouldn't recommend not topping something that way. If we get it too tall, maybe you have to. The neighbor's lawyers calling in and saying, you're blocking my view of the sound. If you don't top that tree, I'm going to send you a bill. So there you go. So there's maybe a reason once in a while, but try to avoid the topping of all kinds.
So you'll get into fruit trees, right?
We'll touch a little bit about everything. So if we look at plants and growth, I'm not going to turn this into a botany lesson, but I could look at any branch of a plant. This is a lilac I borrowed from my yard. You can see the old flower. So this is a plant here. If I just look, what do I have? I have latent or tip buds here that are going to give me more stem length. That's just going to keep growing up until I tell it not to, or it blooms, right? I have lateral buds, which are going to give me plant bushiness. Think of our boxwood. I chop it off, I get what? A thicker, denser, fuller plant, which is the goal by shearing. If I head this back to slow it down, I'm going to try to cut above where I've got buds right there. Now for the one stem I had, now I'm going to have two, and I'm going to have a little fuller plant. So that would be up to kind of how you want to do it. But again, I'm not going to leave a stub. I'm going to try to cut just about 1/2 inch above the bud that I want it to grow from so that I get good bud break, healthy plant, and then off we go, okay? We'll keep going down on that one too. And we could deadhead our old flower out of there. That looks much better. So I could slow my lilac down, you know, I could even go down, you know, down into here if I really wanted to get down and let it start over again. A lot of people cut their lilacs back quite a bit. Mine are up 15-ish foot, big tall trees essentially, which I like over the garden and then have things down below. So lilac's a good example. I think if you kind of look at the different buds, they're very easy to see, and it's a very simple plant. You know, I've got a tip, I've got lateral buds, and I can follow the wood right down and follow my growth pattern. You'll see a little bit different on some of the other ones we look at. Now you saw what I did with making a cut. Let's pretend that this is still good buds here and I want to prune this back. I can see on there, right, everybody can see, this is an opposite bud plant. So if I look at that stem, everything is in perfect pairs up and down the wood, right? It's not alternate, one here, one there, one there, one there, okay? So I pick any one of these, I want to cut about a ½ inch above that bud, and typically at an angle. If I go flat, it's not the end of the world, but around here, especially in the winter, a lot of wet sits on that flat wood. Maybe I have a little rot or a little wood damage. So if I'm gonna cut that, make a proper cut, I wanna cut about 45 degrees and I want a little bit of wood above those buds. Now these two would break and now I would have 2 stems for the one I pruned. Is that making sense to everybody? So again, maybe the lilac in this case, I had 1 flower, right? You saw the one I cut out. Now 2 shoots had already come up and I will have 2 flowers next year. So if I want more bloom, a little more mature plant, doing a little bit of that heading back or letting that plant grow properly is going to give me twice the flower the next season. Okay? So you can see what not to do. If I cut too close, bud's not going to grow. I'm going to have a dead piece of wood and it's going to grow from here. And I'm going to have all those stubs everywhere, right? If I leave too much wood, same thing. I'm taking the chance of getting a little disease in there. Try to get that 45-degree angle and you'll have happy plants. Now if we kind of look at a couple of before and after ones here, you know, again, this is what I try to tell people on trees. If you look at those silhouettes, I haven't changed the height, I haven't changed the spread, I haven't changed anything except for made the structure healthier. I didn't top that tree. I looked out and said, wow, that's really kind of funky. I got a crossing branch, it's uneven, whatever it is. But by cleaning that thing out the right way, I've opened it up, I've kept the same natural silhouette that I wanted, but it's a much healthier plant going forward. All the dead wood's out of the middle, very, very easy to do. Sometimes in the winter we do some of this. We can always go back and touch a little bit here in the early summer as well. On the right there is going to be your fruit. You know, fruit tree is not going to have a big central leader. It's going to have shoots going everywhere. I would always rather have my fruit tree to spread and lower structure so I can pick it a little bit easier. I don't want it to get 30 feet tall. I want to keep those cut back and keep my branches going laterally so I can have a little lower tree that's a little easier to pick. So we'll look at some fruit here in a minute too. Now if I have a large limb, this is usually for me more in the winter time. You know, you're out there in the winter, we get a little snow, we get a little wind, we get a little rain, maybe a limb on the conifers broken partly, or I have some damage on a tree. The biggest thing most people do is go grab the chainsaw, and I'm a limb, and I set the chainsaw down there and start grinding away. What happens? It snaps, it cracks, and then it peels all my skin off my trunk because it can't handle that weight. So think of it as a wound. The bark is like our skin. I want to cut up, make a notch first, then I can go on top and sever it, crack that limb off, and then my third cut is going to be a nice, easy cut right against the trunk to the collar so that it heals properly. Is that making sense? If you walk out there and you slap the chainsaw down, snap, crackle, pop, you're probably going to do some damage to the wood on that. So a little cut up first will always help you a little bit. The vast majority of plants we have around here are going to be multi-stem. There's a lot of plants. We could talk from blueberries to raspberries to barberry to any plant is typically not going to have, our shrubs aren't going to have one trunk, and then a little patio tree. We're going to have 4, 5, 6 trunks growing up from the ground. Even things like vine maple, lilac, all that stuff is multi-stem shrub. So it's a little blurry, don't worry about the words, but the important part is that silhouette. You know, what did I leave and what did I get rid of? Typically, if I have an old blueberry, an old crowded viburnum, lilac, whatever this plant is, it's not about cutting this into a little, you know, ball on the top. It's just going to be more of a mess. It's looking at the base with the helpful little tool like my pruning saw and getting rid of trunks that I don't need. You know, maybe I got 5, now I'm down to 3. Maybe I had 9, now I'm down to 6. But I've got that structure down where, again, I've got daylight, I've got air, I've got some wind going through there. I'm going to have a happier plant, and it's going to be more attractive that way too. So cutting stems in half are just going to make your life look worse down the road. We want to attack the base of those things and get some of that wood all the way out of there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The 1/3 rule on cutting back.
Mm-hmm.
What about a lilac? Can you cut more than a third,
Yeah.
just to take the height down?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll do, and again, I think you walked in right at the beginning. We'll do all the times for questions. We got right at the end. We got plenty of time.
Thank you.
So here's your rule right there. Thanks for the segue. So she asked about the 1/3 rule. I'll raise both my hands. I've broken that rule many times, as I'm sure you guys have as well. Some plants we can get away with it, others we cannot. But you're always going to be safe if I take down 1/3 of height in a year or 1/3 of spread. That's always going to be a safe number. Some things we can get away with more. She mentioned lilac. I could go out and probably saw all my lilac trunks off from 15 feet to the ground, and what's going to happen? I'm going to get shoots off the base, and here we go. We start over again. I may not see flower for a couple years, but the plant will recover itself. We get away with it with hydrangea. We cut more than 1/3 of rhododendron. I can't tell you how many times I look at an old ratty rhododendron and said, all right, let's start you over again. If it works, great. If it doesn't, okay, I'll get another one to replace it with. So like when I bought my house, it was, that's savable, that not so much, that is hideous. How are we going to see if these will come back? We chop things from 8 feet down to the ground, left a few branches to start it over. Many of them are still in my yard. Look great, you know, after 15 years. It didn't take that long for them to look great, but they're still there. You know, we were able to save them. If I just walk out and chop it in half, some things that's not going to turn out so well. So always ask probably is a good way to go if you're talking about rejuvenating a little more than 1/3. So 1/3 rule is always good. My #1 rule is prune after bloom. You know, this class we started years ago, kind of for us Pacific Northwesters that have all this cool spring stuff. Now what do we do here in early summer? Rhodies, azaleas, you know, forsythia, magnolia, I can go on and on. All the vast majority of our plants are going to pop out in March, April, May. And how do we prune those after the fact so that I get the same reward next year? You know, if you take a plant, an easy one, most people all know rhododendron. If I have a rhododendron, it just bloomed, maybe it was April, maybe it was May. Mine are in full bloom right now. I got some later ones in my yard. Some are already done. But when it's done blooming, you know, what do? That's my chance to prune if I want to, not that I have to, but that's my chance to prune because that plant is going to regrow all summer, set its flower bud, and then I get to enjoy it the next spring. So if I go out and prune a rhododendron in September or the winter or early spring, it may not hurt the plant, you may not kill it, but you're not going to have any flower. And why do I want that rhodie? Because I'd like to see a little bloom every spring. Other than that, we just have green leaves, so I'd rather see the flower. So look at your plants like that. You know, we'll get into some, we're not going to again turn this into a botany class, but there's a lot of plants that we would say bloom on old wood, right? Other things that bloom on new wood. And so this class will do a little bit of both, but I think the vast majority of stuff we're going to talk about and people are going to ask about are old wood bloomers. So I have to be very careful when I do the pruning on them so that I still get the flowering the next season, okay? To me, it's always have a purpose. You know, is it a view? Is it too big? Is it unhealthy? A disease? Bad structure? Crossing branch? I mean, we can go on and on. I kind of jokingly said the neighbor's lawyer is threatening to sue you or blocking our view of the sound. There's a good reason to probably prune. But there's quite a bit, you know, in the case of fruit. I want more fruit, more berries. You know, there's easy reasons to have a purpose to prune. It doesn't mean we have to go out and prune every single thing in our yard because it's winter, because it's June. That's not what this class is. It's probably looking around your yard and saying, okay, that could use a little tidying, this could use a little haircut, this could get cut back a bit, and I will have even a nicer plant for the next season kind of thing. My big thing probably for this class would be attack dormant issues in the dormant season. We get after frost, everything's locked down, we're dormant in the winter. I probably have a better chance to see the structure of my gigantic shade tree or whatever it is, and I can probably get in there and do some thinning, some heading back, whatever I'm going to do to it in the winter. But I can also look at a lot of times here this time of year, especially on the thinning end, and see what happened this spring. Did it get too bushy, too thick, too large? And I can crux some of that here immediately right now, okay? Now there's your old wood bloomer, new wood bloomers, and there's a lot of plants that people can ask about here after class. There's a lot of plants out here we have for sale, but if you think of, again, what's the basic purpose of prune? I want to prune it back, and I want to get some fresh new growth. I want to rejuvenate my plant a little bit by doing some pruning, right? So part of that should be, to me, the flower discussion, which might lead to fruit and berries as well. But how do I get more bloom out of my plant season to season? Because I choose the right time of the year to do it is number one. If I have an old wood blooming plant and I go out anytime in the fall, the winter, early spring, I've cut off the majority of my flowers. I'm not going to have that spring. That could be magnolia, azalea, dogwood trees, cherry tree, anything that grows up for a season, sets its flower buds, and then you get to enjoy those the next year. If I do prune back hard in the winter, I've cut off all my blooms. Is that making sense to everybody? Other things are new wood bloomers. Do whatever the heck you want to them, because they're going to grow up and bloom immediately. If we take a simple shrub, most people have spireas. Everyone kind of know what a spirea is? There's one up here, little pink flowers. So that's a plant I can do whatever I want. You can walk by mine right now, and it's about 4 feet tall, about ready to bloom in my rockery. After it blooms, I'll chop it in half because I'll get more foliage up, I'll get a whole nother bloom, and I'll get enough double flowering in the fall. If I cut that from 4 feet in the winter, it's literally a little clump of twigs about that far off the ground sitting all winter long, and then here comes spring, grows up, and I get my flower immediately. So that's an easy example of probably a new wood bloomer, something I get the flower on right away. Now, what am I looking, I'll show you some branches here and some plants, but what kind of stuff am I looking to do here over the summer? We've gotten through spring flowering, a lot of stuff maybe already flushed out new growth. It's not too late to do any of this, but what's the most important things as we head into early summer? I try to tell people to put your pruners away in August. A little deadheading, some of that dead wood, all that's fine, but I'm not going to go out and cut some stuff way back in August or September. I don't have enough summer left for those to regrow, get fresh growth, harden off, and be safe for that next winter. I see it all the time driving out here from Everett on the boulevard. The guy's out there with his chainsaw on the stick, cutting his laurel mid-September. Oh, sweet, looks perfect. I got my little box. And then what happens? It starts to grow, because when we prune, what happens? We get fresh growth. We get the first frost in, it nips all the growth, turns it brown. Now we gotta go do it again the next spring, and that sometimes may cause some damage to those plants over the winter. So I want to try to get this done by August. You got about 6 to 8 weeks here of good summer pruning time, and then we walk away from the pruners late summer, fall. Once we get frost and it's cold in the winter, now I can go attack some of that dormant stuff and get ahead for the next year. Okay, so what I'm looking to do right now, all broadleaf plants. If I'm an evergreen plant, I keep my foliage in the winter. If it's not blooming here in the summer, I'll throw that in there because there's a few that'll bloom in the summer, arhebes and gardenias and some daphnes and some of the other stuff. I can cut that back now. I want to cut it back, feed them, let them regrow, set their flower buds. I'll see you again in flower in 2024. Okay, that's our hedges, boxwood, Japanese holly, laurels I mentioned, all that stuff we want to clip and get nice and thick and bushy. This is, again, prime time for that. Conifers, I brought up 2 here. We have a pine right there with the candles, and then I brought a yew up, and there's a little arborvitae on the corner of the table. Now, conifers are a tough one because we could have all the conifers in the world, and it really comes down to only 2 ways to prune them. So if I have a pine, a fir, think of your Christmas tree. When you bring a Christmas tree, what do I have? I have a trunk, right? And then I have little rings of branches that grow, like a fir, noble fir. You can see that on a lot of conifers around in our area. That's what we call a whorl conifer. It grows in whorls or rings of branches. Now I can cut candles on a pine. I don't know if anybody has pine. If I want to slow it down, I can cut candles in half. I could pitch the candles off every other year sometimes. I can do some pruning. I can go below that point, let it start a little lower. Those are all options. What I can't do is cut that to bare wood. So if I'm going to cut back a fir, a pine, a spruce, then I'm like, whoa, you just grew this wide. I want to go back to there. That's not going to happen. because I can't cut that to bare wood. It's never going to put any more growth out. You might as well just take the limb off of the trunk, and that's not going to hurt it, okay? Is that making sense? So I have to be a little more careful on conifer to do a little bit maybe every season and not wait 5 years and then try to go back to the way it was. Usually you've got a pine, a yew, most evergreen plants are going to hold their foliage for 3 years and then drop it naturally. There's nothing wrong with it. We call that flagging. A lot of people come up here in September, what's wrong with my cedar? What's wrong with my arborvitae? What's wrong with my pine? I got all a bunch of brown needles on mulch at the base. That's our old growth shedding out because the new stuff has replaced it over that summer. So a whorl conifer, I can clip candles, I can shear it if I wanted to get it nice and thick like a Christmas tree grower would do. I can cut back, but I just can't go in to where I don't have needles. If I go past that point, then the branch will not grow. Is that easy enough? The other half of that we call random branch conifers. Yews, arborvitaes, hemlocks. There's a lot of other conifers. This is like a boxwood. What's the difference between that and that? I can look at the growth of that yew and it's like a boxwood. There's a zillion little buds all the way up and down that stem. So I could grab my hedge clipper, top it, shear it, put it into a little narrow hedge, whatever I want, and I'm gonna have a happy yew that's nice and thick and easy to grow. I'm not gonna wait 5 years and then again try to go back to the way it was because it's the same problem. I can't cut to bare wood or I'm not gonna have any more needles come out, okay? Just same with that little arborvitae. We call those meatballs. I got 3 of those meatballs off my patio. It's kind of a little hedge. Once a year in the summer, sweet. I just get the hedge clippers, lightly shear them so they stay nice and tight. Walk away, I'm done. You know, one time a year and I'm happy with that going forward, okay? This could be our arborvitae hedge. You know, someone's inevitably going to ask me, well, my hedge is now 15 feet tall. I'd like to go back to 8. There's another one you can probably get away with sawing off the trunks more than a third. You know, you're not going to look down on it and go, ooh, that looks ridiculous, because it does. But we chop that off and then it just slowly regrows and here we go again. We go back to the way it was before down the road. But I'm not going to shear this way to bare wood. I see that a lot in my neighborhood and they're not going to be happy when it never turns green again. And now I got my nice green hedge wall with big brown bare patches all over it because it got pruned too hard. So lightly every year, or let it get a little bigger every year and live with it. Those are our 2 choices, but we're not going to cut into the bare wood. We won't have our hedge anymore. I do a lot of thinning of maples this time of year in my own yard. So I look out in spring, it's usually wet. We had an incredible dry spell this year. May has been spectacular. I wish we had a little rain. Hopefully today we'll get some, I hate to say. But we need some rain now. But typically on an average spring here, I'm going to look out at my Japanese maple on a rainy day and I might have limbs that are hanging all the way down to the ground. So that's a good sign to you to say, okay, I got to get some weight out of that tree. Yes, I can head it back a bit, thinning out some of those branches. All of a sudden that tree comes back up to the way it was before, kind of thing. So I think it's a good time to look at Japanese maple, some of the simple yard trees we do, to look at the structure and fix that here in spring, because then we got all summer again to regrow and we've got a happy plant going into the next season. Anything blooms in spring, rhodie, azalea, heather, pieris, I can go on and on. All that stuff should be cut here right after it blooms or into early summer. If I'm going to prune a rhododendron, this is the only time of year that we do it. Same with azaleas. Who's got azaleas? Do we like our azaleas like little nice thick dense plants that are covered in flowers, or do we like a little bit more open azalea? So you can have it either way, but people go by my yards like, I can't even believe how much flowers are on those things. It's not like I get a chainsaw on the stick and turn them into ice cubes, but lightly cutting them back on top is going to get me a super dense full plant with maximum flowers. If I got an azalea like this Hino, if you took this home today, I would tell you to cut it back to here. You know, cut 6-8 inches off it, and you'll probably go, what did he tell me that to do? I got a piece of bare wood here, what's that going to do? When this leafs back out, now I've got a super tight plant, and for every stem I cut, I got triple the flower. So now we're going to have our solid, dense, blooming azalea going into the next season. Now, if you like the woodland, you know, a little bit more open and natural look, there's nothing wrong with that either. We would not do the shearing to get that effect in our yard, but probably the easiest thing to do is a quick little 5-minute shear back on my evergreen azaleas when they're done blooming. suck up the mess, walk away, here we go. We got a brand new plant, nice and thick, going into the next season. Spring blooming trees. So if I had magnolia, dogwood, cherries, plums, crab apples, I can go on and on. If I go out in the wintertime, you know, thinning it out, great. That's going to help your tree. Pulling a branch out here and there, opening up the structure, fabulous. But if I'm trying to beat nature and keep my dogwood at 10 feet tall, which I find most people like to keep their trees dwarf, you know, I'm going to go out there and prune it in early summer, and that's the only time, because that plant is going to grow up all summer, set its flower bud that I get to enjoy next year. If I go out this fall, I go out this winter, I do it early spring, you're going to cut off most of your bloom. So I would rather have you enjoy the cherry, the crab, whatever it is, enjoy the full spring flower show, then you can go in there and do your heading back and pruning on there, and I won't skip any flowering, okay? Lavenders is a common question. Who's got lavender? Who prunes their lavender? Oh, we got a couple. Usually I get no. I was like, no, I don't prune that one. So again, I'm not going to offend anybody. It's your yard. You can have what you like. But who likes the squim lavender? I'm from here, so I say sequin. I say sequin. So sequin lavender. I can't say it that way. So squim lavender. You know, you go to farms, and what do I see? A big, thick, dense pincushion that is just covered in flowers multiple times a year. That's pruning. There's nothing else to do that except for pruning. It's hot, it's dry, I got good drainage, and I shear them. When these flowers, I either cut them to bring them in to enjoy, or they're done and they're brown, the bees are no longer there, and I want more flower. If I took this home in my yard, I'd be cutting this thing off right about there after this was done blooming, because now I'm going to have a low, dense plant. Here comes more flowers, that I'm going to have a much more attractive one. Who's got lavender with, you know, foot of wood, 2 foot of wood, and then we got a little frosting on top, right? That's usually what lavender will do if we don't prune it. So it's up to you what you like in your yard, but if you like those tight, easy lavenders that are maximum bloom, it's all about shearing. That's an easy example of a plant that should be cut maybe once or twice during the season. I would cut this coming out of winter for one, let it flush up, let it bloom on its new wood, maybe one more time early summer, here comes another flower, then I'm good. I'll see you again next year kind of thing. Be exactly the same thing with heather. Again, everybody who hates heather, be honest. Because usually everyone's like, ugh, I can't do heather anymore. So the problem with heather is again, lack of pruning. People buy it, it's great for flower, especially over the winter months when we need some pollinator help. But what does it do? It ends up like a tire, a big donut. I got a woody center and all these little frosting of flowers out in a circle because I didn't prune it. When those are done blooming, it's exactly like that lavender. Shear those back, and I'm going to have a dense, nice looking plant that's going to maximize my flower again for the next season, okay? Last one there, spirea, I mentioned already. You know, I don't care what kind of spirea you have, just I'll bring it out just in case anyone doesn't see that. You know, this is magic carpet here. But you can see it's still in bloom. I'm not going to do this today, but it's getting close. But when I'm done with this, where's my hedge clippers? You go, what is he doing? So when this is done flowering here, I'm literally, if this is in my yard, I'm going to get my laptop destroyed here today. I'm going to literally cut this thing back. You know, we could use our hand pruners if we wanted to. But I'm going to cut that thing back, and you're going to go, wow, why would I buy that? You come back here in a month, I'm going to have all brand new orange-red leaves like spring. A whole nother bud comes up, and I got a whole nother bloom. This plant will look like spring twice a year if I just give my spireas a light little shear here when they're done blooming, and usually it's June, early July. So we can extend our flowering season that way, and a very easy thing to cut back if you've got spirea, okay? Now if we talk fruit and berries here for a minute, because I think this is something people are gonna ask a little more about. So berries is a tough one. So anybody got questions on berries? We got a couple people for berry pruning. We got a couple. So if we look at berries, you know, again, this is something that's going to bloom on old wood. A blueberry is blooming this spring, and it's producing on what was there from last year, 1-year-old wood. Most of the brambles, the raspberries, most of that stuff's all going to be the same way. So if I'm going to prune it, typically these are things I do in the winter, but sometimes in the summer I bring this up because maybe I've got an old high bush blueberry and I'm picking an incredible amount of berries on a really old piece of wood right in the middle of that plant. At some point, I'm going to get my little pocket saw and that entire piece is coming out of that plant because more growth has replaced it. Now I don't have blueberry here, I've got blueberry down a little more manageable. Does that kind of make sense? So sometimes in the summer, when I'm picking, I'll just take a little piece of flagging tape and tie that on a branch here or there to remind myself next winter, that's got to go, this has got to go, that's got to go, because I want to keep opening it up. It's like that multi-stem picture we looked at. I don't want 20 canes all crowded together so I got bad sun, bad air. I want to keep that 1-year-old wood coming off the root system of the plant so that I get maximum production, okay? It's the same with the raspberry. If I had a spring crop raspberry that I picked in June, all that wood is done. It's 1-year-old wood, it's done. I'm gonna pick berries off what grows this summer next year. So I'm never gonna prune out new wood out of a raspberry patch, but I might get some old stuff out, whether it's now or in the winter time coming forward. Same thing if we're doing like gourmet blackberries and tayberries and marionberries, my favorite, all that stuff. Everything happens on 1-year-old wood, so that's not a plant we're gonna go cut all the way back. It'll grow, but I'll never get any bloom. I leave what grew this year to bloom next spring, and then we keep that cycle going, if that makes sense, okay? So a little bit of thinning. The fruit in general, so I kind of put it in 2 chunks here. Apples and pears, we would call spur fruit. And maybe the easiest thing with that discussion is we've got 2 espaliers out here that we butcher and torture and bonsai, because that's what we do with the espaliers. It's no different than a tree, the pruning aspects of it. We can hop out there after class, and I haven't pruned it yet on purpose so we can look at it today. So you can kind of see what happens with an apple and pear. We had our nice little winter pruning session. We were nice and tidy, and right now it's probably already shot up, what, 3 foot of wood? You got all these water sprouts and suckers going all over the place. We're not going to shear those all off every year because, again, I need some 1-year-old wood to produce the spur of the 2nd year so I can pick it the 3rd year. So it's not about shaving the whole thing off every year. You're going to eventually have a gap in production, but it's looking at that mess and going, okay, I can leave one, going directions I want them to, get rid of the rest, and then take those long shoots, cut them down to where I only leave like 2 or 3 little bud sections. Now I get spur, my tree's shorter, more open, and I'll maximize my production on those little shorter branches. That would be like if I drove over right now, you saw Wenatchee, Yakima, they were growing fruit commercially. That's what you would see them doing. The trees almost look like bonsais or espaliers. Big, thick branches, short, that are maximum fruit in those bunches. They're easy to pick, and we get great harvest that way, okay? The cherries, the plums, apricots, peaches, all the rest of that, it's the same thing. What grows up this summer, okay, that's what's going to bloom on 1-year-old wood next year to give me more cherries or plums or peaches or whatever it is. So I'm not going to go out and cut all that off every year, or I'm going to have problems with production the next season. With apples and pears, it's almost a 3-year process. I get growth, then I get spurs, and then I pick it the 3rd. With these, it grows 1 year, it blooms the next spring, and I pick it that summer, okay? So try to avoid the shaving of everything off. Opening things up is okay, tidying them up, but not shaving it all down every season. Now, big one for me in the summer is obviously maximizing flower power. You know, I got a lot of perennials, I do some annuals and pots, but I want to see flower power all the way through the summer into fall. I'm not looking for my 4 weeks of color and I'll see you next year. So by deadheading a little bit, or choosing self-deadheading plants, especially with annuals, that's going to keep them blooming with minimal effort. I brought one in here, so I thought it's an easy one to show you. Does anyone have blanket flower? This is one of my favorite little perennials. So I have this all over my yard, hot sun, dry, easy to grow, nice and low. I like orange, red, yellow, so that's kind of my colors. But I saved this one intentionally because what do I have here? I got a zillion flower buds coming out right now. I have some blooms open, and I already have some seed heads that have already bloomed. The bees have done their thing. So if I'm going to try to keep this blooming for a few weeks here in the summer, I'm going to try to keep those little seed heads cut out, because If I keep the seeds out of there, more bud, more bloom keeps coming up. That's an easy thing. If I let a plant go to seed with a perennial, it's gonna go, okay, sweet, I'm gonna make the most seed I can to preserve myself, sow some seed in the fall, the birds get some, and we're happy. So it's not gonna bloom as much if we don't deadhead. Salvias, the blanket flowers, anything in the yard. With the modern perennial, you've got so much choice of stuff that's gonna bloom for 6 months versus 6 weeks like it always was. I can pick almost anything out there, and if I deadhead a little bit here in the early summer, midsummer, it's just gonna keep flowering like it was starting over again. So I'm gonna increase my flower power for sure. Now when we get to fall, I walk away from the pruning, let the seeds dry, birds are happy, I'm happy. Still a little flower color on it. My seeds turn brown, they drop, I get free plants if I want them, or the birds have a place to forage a little bit of protein as well, okay? So deadheading way to go. Roses, who's got roses? Anyone got? We had rose class a couple weeks ago. So does everyone know the 5-leaf rose rule? 5 leaves only. I intentionally picked this nice sitting pretty because it was about done blooming. So if I have this rose bush here, you know, these flowers, I got one little one here, we'll just do them all because he's getting pretty close. There's still a bud to open. But if I'm gonna cut this down, I'm gonna follow each stem and look for groups of 5 leaves only. And in particular stuff that's going out away from the middle. Is that making sense? So here's a perfect candidate. I can cut right above that one. That's gonna make my plant bloom faster and repeat bud and bloom on a rose very quickly. If I let this dry, it's gonna go to seed. It's gonna take me a lot longer to get a second flower stalk out of there. But I could go, let's see, I wanna leave my rose taller. I'm gonna probably deadhead up here to the first set of 5 leaves. Maybe I wanna keep my rose a little lower, which is me. I could follow that stem all the way down to anywhere I've got 5 and cut to that point. But I'm always gonna try somewhere outside so I can keep the growth going out and not back across the middle. So we can do this one here in about 2 seconds, I bet. We gotta walk on rose petals here after class, right? So we can cut this back here. And you know, now I keep feeding your roses if you haven't yet. This is a plant likes to get fed, you know, probably every 6 weeks in the summer. But you know, that whole thing's deadheaded here. I could throw another dose of food on it if I wanted, if I'm on schedule. This thing will send up new growth. I'll have another flowers here in about a month. I'll see more blooms on that. If I leave this alone, probably would have been 2 months before I saw another flower. Yes?
So if the deers have gotten to your roses.
They pruned them for you. Yeah.
So what do you do to recover that? Just go back to that 5th leaf?
Try to go back to the 5th if they've nipped a little buds here and there. Cut any dead wood out for sure. But again, you throw some food on that thing in the sun in the summer here, it's gonna go crazy. It'll bounce right back out. And then again, you see the last thing there, fertilize. Because if I want flower power, the fertilizer is never gonna be a substitute. If I keep things fed, I'm gonna keep getting my flower, okay? So again, put your pruners away in August and wait till after frost. Fall is the one time I try to avoid all pruning, period. So we want to let things naturally grow, set their flower bud, harden off as we start to cool off in the fall. We get frost, now we're locked down for the winter. Now I can choose to go out mid-November, December, January, February, whenever I want, and get some of those winter pruning projects done, okay? Walk away from the broadleafs. That's one of the personal pet peeve of me. And a common one, I get a lot of questions on hydrangeas. You know, what do I do with hydrangea? If, you know, certainly we can cut out dead wood still if we haven't pruned at all, but that's a March thing, not a fall thing. If I had either kind of hydrangea, I'm gonna deadhead the flower sometime in November, December, just so I don't have that weight to break stems, throw them in the yard waste. I'm not gonna be doing any wood pruning until we get into the next March. Now I wait for them to start telling me where you're going to grow from. We cut to those points and then off we go for another season. Hydrangea is a great example of a plant. Well, there's a few exceptions, but 99% of hydrangeas bloom on new wood now. So I can prune that back in spring, grows up, immediately flowers for me. I don't have to worry about leaving old wood, except on some of the old-fashioned types of shade hydrangeas. So last one here is just a few Trevor tips. Grab a sharpener, make your life easier. I'm not kidding you. We sell a couple hundred of those a year. And that is the #1 thing I hear comments back from. Man, I'm so glad I got that sharpener. It's easy to use, does keeps them sharp. Nothing's worse than mashing plants. If we have not sharp blades, you're gonna mash everything and not get clean cuts. I love that pocket saw and a pair of bypass pruners. Those are my #2 top tools for sure. Know your plants, or ask. Ask me, ask the staff. If you're not sure when something blooms, we can ID what you have and go, okay, this is what we're going to set up for kind of a maintenance schedule for that shrub or that tree. If we get out and prune this time of year, we're not going to sacrifice flowering. If we're going to maximize our bloom, we do it this time of year. So kind of knowing your plants and when they bloom is going to be a huge tip. Right plant in the right place is in every class I teach. You shouldn't have to go out and prune something every single year to keep it the same size. We probably got the wrong variety or the wrong plant in that space. If you're, again, it's your yard. If you like the little snow cone trees and the rest of it, it's your landscape. You can do what you like with it. But if we're going to try to let stuff grow naturally, we shouldn't have to cut something back every season. The hedges, exception to that rule. I would never chop a tree, period. It just drives me crazy when I see around. It happens a lot more, I think, in commercial situations. It's not as much as homeowners. But, you shouldn't probably plant a 60-foot birch as a curb tree on the side of the road, because inevitably you're going to take the chainsaw out and turn it into some sort of funky topiary by sawing all the trunks off and letting it grow 6 feet every year. My neighbor in Everett, Mr. Dentist, has beautiful Norway maples that are that big of trunks that are about 8 feet tall, because he goes out and just lops off the trunk every year and lets it grow like a little football, and then it's like, hey, it's your tree. I got to look at it every day, but I'm not going to call the plant police on you. Thinning trees out this time of year is huge. That's a big thing with me. I hate spraying. Who likes spraying? Nobody raises it. You like spraying? Oh, I don't like spraying. So if we get things thinned out, we get better sun, we get better air. You're not going to have as much bug and disease. I mean, it's as simple as that. If I get the old wood, dead wood thinned out of crowns and I get things tidied up, you're going to have a much, much happier plant. Chainsaw and a stick. My sister uses hers nonstop. That's her prerogative down at her farm. But I'm not a chainsaw and a stick guy. If you've got one, great. Works great for hedges, but please don't go out and prune your lace leaf maple with it and your rhododendron with it and all the trees with it, because it's just not right. I'm sorry. Don't be a butcher. Learn how to do it the right way. One of these years I want to do, we used to call this the good, the bad, and the ugly, old Clint Eastwood style. We could do that in the winter, and I could bring pictures in and go, okay, and what not to do, what to do. I can't believe I saw this on the side of the road. Yes, this is a good one. But everybody drives around, you probably see some plant butchery jobs. We'll leave it at that. And I'm a big proponent. Let plants attain their natural beauty. You're going to have a much prettier landscape if you let things grow up and not try to keep things butchered. Again, there's exceptions. We can easily shear back a lot of stuff and keep it pretty tidy, but most trees, most large shrubs, things like that, let them kind of do their thing. We can thin them out and maintain them a little bit, but they don't have to be cut into ice cubes all the time, right? Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple plants here. We're doing okay on time. We've got a couple minutes. So you can always email pictures in, bring samples down. We got email address on there. Easy thing, I'm always here. We got great staff here. It's not just me. Bring them down. Hey, what do I got? I'm not sure what to do with it. A, we can ID it, and B, okay, down the road, let's try to prune it this time of the year. This is how we want to do it. We can give you a hand kind of getting that dialed in, okay? So I brought in a couple things just to kind of show you. We did blanket flower. Who's got grasses? Got a couple. So grass is always an interesting one. We talk about this a little more at the early spring pruning class, because I've missed my window. If I've got a perennial grass and I had the brown all winter, we want to cut that off before we get into spring to just let it start brand new over again. It's going to be tough to go into the one that's not cut back and get the old cut out without hurting the new. Evergreen ones seem to be the dilemma. So if I have carex, something like that, little sedges, a lot of evergreen stuff, I use a lot of these in my own garden and pots. Cutting it like this is never going to solve any problem at all. You're just going to have brown sawed off edges on the whole plant. So either I cut the entire thing off about 2-3 inches above the crown, put some food on it and let it start over again, or we kind of do this and grab that fresh growth like a wad of hair and I can saw all that lower stuff off, let that flop back over, and it probably looks a little better going forward. Now I have a lot of these, like I said, different forms of sedge. I don't do that necessarily every year, but it's probably every 3 years for me. It's like, okay, that's enough, start you over again, and here we go for another season kind of thing, okay? We did lavender, everybody's good on that, rose. The azalea, like I showed you, shear it off. You know, if you want a tight plant, I've got, this is Hino Crimson. I have Hino Crimsons in my front yard that are over 20 years old that I put in, that are only about 1.5 foot off the ground and 3 foot across, and you can't even tell there's leaves on them when they bloom. It doesn't look like I butchered them at all. Just a light clipping on azaleas makes a huge difference. Now we saw the conifers, and then the pine is kind of a little different example. The pine, spruce, again the firs. Be real careful never to cut into bare wood. So if I show you a couple, I brought some things from my house here. So let's do rhododendron here real quick. We got 3. If I shake everything else out of it. So this is a modern rhododendron. Look at the leaf color on that. I wish I could find these to sell. I got this years ago. This is one called Star Bright Champagne. So beautiful flower, and now I've almost got photinia. Whole thing is purple burgundy now, the new growth. Really nice for the summertime. So if it doesn't matter what rhodie it is, but if I take that limb, this is obviously where my flower was, and I'm OCD, so yes, I went out and pinched all my trusses off when it was done. So I don't have those on there, and then we got our new leaves on. But you can see already, I'm getting new growth out of here. This one's already flush. I can actually see my flower bud right there already forming that I'll get to see next April. So this is already into summer season. I can still prune this. With rhododendron, you know, I could go here and cut down below where my flowers were and look like, okay, what has he done to that? Wait a month and it's going to look just like that again. But I've gotten rid of a little extra growth. I've deadheaded it at the same time, but now I'm going to have the new leaf comes out and I'll have the same look as before. If I look real close on rhodie, you can come off after class, but you're going to look like, what's he cutting it there for? I cut it off there because when I look at this wood here, I've got latent buds all over the place. Maybe my dog snapped it, snow broke it. There's my insurance policy on rhododendron. This would actually swell, grow, and here we go again. And that's sometimes why we can break the 1/3 rule. So this is another old one I kept called Pink Pearl. It just finished. Big old massive thing in my backyard. This thing's probably got a trunk about 2 feet across on it. So it just finished blooming. You can see the ones that didn't bloom already got the new growth out. But if I was going to prune that, same thing. I could lop that back. I could cut those 2 off, look like it's pruned, but I've got all these latent buds here. This shoots up, it's going to grow, and I'll still set my flower bud. I'm good to go for the next spring. If I go out in the winter and do this, I cut my flower off. I'm not going to have that bud to enjoy the next year. So we want to do that right after bloom. You can see this is a good example of one in the shade in my house. Big old leggy one. You know, big old, this is probably 8 foot tall and 12 feet across on the back of the house. So this is one I go through and do some of this here after it's bloom. I'll thin it back a little bit so it stays a little tighter and bushier. But again, I can still have time for my flower bud to come out and I maximize my bloom the next season. Yeah.
How do you know where you're cut to cut?
Well, if you look on, I think I used them all up. If you can, I can show you after class, because we look on the wood, again, as long as I stay out where I have leaves, I'm never going to be worried at all. But rhododendron's one, if I even look down the bare wood, I'm going to find those dormant or latent buds all over the place. You can probably look on a trunk and find a bunch of them just sitting there waiting. So that's my insurance policy. If I'm going to really cut it back, that's where it's going to break bud. Maybe you don't get it right, which isn't the end of the world, because you'll go, okay, I see that, it really was down here and here it comes. I can go back and clean that stub off that I left as well. Okay, do it that way. Okay? If we do just a couple more here, saw our boxwood. I'm gonna have to go to the yard waste after class. So anybody got 9 bark? So mine's in full bloom right now. They got the seeds coming out. It's a great plant, I love. But you know, we looked at lilac, hydrangea. Let's do, where's the hydrangea piece? This is a PG hydrangea. But here's a great example of shrub growth. Here's the two different types right here. What do I have with hydrangea? I've got opposite buds. I've got perfect pairs up and down every stem. There's always two, and then two, and then two, and then two, right? So I had one flower. Where's my pruners? So let's just pretend this is later in the season. I'm going to have a flower on every one of these tips. When I cut it down, now I get two shoots come up, and I got two flowers, right? I've just increased my bloom a little bit. That's going to be an opposite type plant. You can see on 9 bark, now we stagger alternate bud plants. So now I'm like the rose was, I'm going to be a little more careful. Like if this branch is sticking out of me on the trunk, I don't want a piece going back into my face, right? I want to keep this thing going out in some sort of natural vase shape. So I'm going to be a little more careful to prune to a piece that's going the direction I want. If I just lop it off, maybe it comes in the middle and I don't have the shape I'm looking for, okay? So just keep an eye on, rose is an easy example because everyone knows they want them kind of growing out of the middle, but this would allow me to pick any one of these spots and put the energy into a place I do want it to go, okay? Yeah, that 9 bark's pretty. I hate to prune that one.
Do you know which one that is?
That is, what did I put in years ago? That is Diablo, I believe. Yeah, an old-fashioned one. So here's the last one here. I brought in a few pieces of my twig dogwood. I love twig dogwood for the birds. So I got a big old twig dogwood mass in the front bank. The birds can kind of hang out in and hide out from the bigger birds, I say. But this is yellow twig dogwood. So you can see it just finished flowering. I've got my berry started in here where the birds are going to like in the fall. This isn't a plant I ever go back and shear because I want the birds to have their thing on here. But this is another one that's opposite bud. So if I was going to slow this down, you know, I could go in here and pick a couple points where it's already forked. Now this is going to shoot into 2, and I'll get another one here, and it'll just regrow like it was before. I'm not going to go into bare wood way down. I'm just going to take that whole limb off like I did this morning. But I can cut to any one of those points and directional. I can get the direction I want it to go. Because if you got twig dogwood, it just wants to go everywhere. So cutting this back a little bit will probably keep your twig dogwood a little tighter as we go season to season.
You haven't mentioned holly trees.
Holly trees. Now holly trees, you have a big one at your place? Yeah, so again, I wouldn't ever cut to bare wood on holly because it's evergreen, but those are going to bloom here in the summer and then produce their berries in the fall. So if you're going to prune a holly, it's probably going to be not shearing it back. You may not get a lot of bloom or berries that year if that's what you're interested in. It's going to be,
a bunch of straggling ones.
yeah, so we can,
all over.
yeah, so we can cut,
Those to the trunk.
yeah, cut all those back in the trunk and tighten that whole thing up a little bit. Yeah, English holly's one that I don't think they put it on there yet, but it's probably going to be on the noxious weed list at some point because it doesn't belong here. Yes. If you had a PG hydrangea, yeah, I mean, if you're doing hydrangea, this is not probably the best time of year to do hydrangea. Again, I always bring it up because I think a lot of people don't either try to do it in the fall, which is the wrong time. Do it early spring, and then you almost walk away for the summer. If I go out and prune mine now, I'm going to delay the flowering. So right now, all my hydrangeas have buds set on them. The PG is almost there, the sun one. If I cut that back now, I still have enough summer for it to regrow, but I probably won't see a bloom on it until August. I'm going to be another 6 weeks out.
How about the oak leaf hydrangea?
So oak leaf is one that blooms on old wood. So if I'm going to prune back oak leaf, I'm going to do it gingerly, or again, that's got sweet foliage and bark and a nice flower. Maybe you don't have as much flower one year by cutting it back, but the plant will still grow. Yeah, make it easy that way. Okay. Yes?
Oh, I've been tempted to take new growth off my grapevine.
Okay.
You can do that in the summer. I'm thinking it gives more growth to the grapes.
Exactly, it does. I mean, a lot of grapes, kiwis, that stuff grows so fast, it's not going to hurt the plant at all. And if you didn't do it in the summer, if we were at the berry class here in February, I'd be telling you to do it late winter, because we don't want any of that wispy little growth. I would say anything pencil thickness,
Yeah, I did
less
cut
than
it
that
back
is
in the
done.
winter, but now
Oh, it'll shoot out 6 feet in the season, and so we can pinch some of that now, or again, next winter when it goes dormant, we get all that stringy growth back out of there. I know right now, it'll be the next week or two. I'll be working on our wisteria. Anybody got wisteria vine? You know, they just finished blooming. If we don't prune wisteria, it would cover half the county. I mean, it's just going to keep going and going, and it's never going to stop. So that will get cut back. Probably 2/3 of that huge one out there will be gone, because I just want short pieces of wood, because that's where I'm going to drop my flowers again next year. Yes.
Sword ferns once a year?
Yep. You know, that's a great question, because you could do it either way, but if I have an evergreen fern, evergreen, quote unquote, I'll put in quotes, it's going to look way better if you start them over once a year to me. I always hit right coming out of winter. You got the fiddleheads coming up on all ferns. If it's a perennial one, clean off the old growth. You got a brand new plant. If it's evergreen, sword fern, deer fern, tassel fern, you know, on and on. We got a lot of good evergreen. I'd cut all those old fronds off and let the brand new plant start over. Do you have to do it every year? You know, probably not, but to me, it would be kind of like the grass. Let that fern tell you, okay, it's getting tired, the leaves are on the ground, it's flat, it's looking a little run. We cut all that off, you got a brand new plant again. Yeah. Yes?
Can you talk a bit about tomatoes and other kind of vegetables?
About tomatoes?
Yeah.
So, tomatoes, I'm assuming you have indeterminate. You just want to keep them going and they keep fruiting. You shouldn't have to do probably a lot of pruning on those unless it's getting, tomatoes grow pretty fast and get a little crazy in the heat. But you want as much growth as you can to maximize your crop. So again, pinching out a branch here and there is not going to hurt at all. But I would never think you'd want to do any kind of major pruning back on those until after the season when they went to the compost, you know, going into winter. Okay. Yes?
What about bay laurel? We have one that it was like this small, and now it's
Getting big?
huge thing.
Do you use it for cooking?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so with bay laurel, herbs, something like that, you can always do a little snipping here and there to get the leaves off it. I think you should feel lucky, to be honest with you, you've had it this many years, because that's a plant that's right on the hardy line up here, and I know mine done this winter. I had it in a pot. So thank your lucky stars first.
This thing's like almost 20 feet tall.
Yeah, so again, that's like, it's not a laurel like English laurel, but it's the same idea. Coming out of winter only is when I would never do that in the late summer, fall, winter. But coming out of winter ideally, or to early summer now, I could cut that back pretty much or shear it however I want. You can still use some leaves. You're just going to get more foliage back out. Try not to cut it to bare wood. That's a little, you're going to take a chance if we go to bare wood that it won't come back quite as nice. Yep. Got a few more? Yes.
Do you have your program available that your slide shows?
It's all. This will be up on YouTube on the website. I could post the slide pictures on there too.
Is it under Sunnyside?
Sunnyside's got a YouTube channel. You'll see all the classes on there for sure, and you can connect to it from our website too. I probably won't get this on till Monday. It's usually tough to get on the weekends, but Monday it'll be up on the website for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you look, with all the classes, we've always got extra specials going. Don't tell them I told you this, but with our computer system, I have to put all tools on sale 20%, so it's not just pruners, but all the tools are on. Just don't tell them I told you that. But if you want to grab anything, it's all 20% off. You got through next Friday to use that. That's a great special to get a couple new weapons for the pruning if you need them. There's a lot of stuff on sale. It's our 75th anniversary this year, so we tried to leave sales going longer and put more and more on sale every week. I think right now you got fruit trees 20, roses are on special, rhodies and azaleas are on special. There's some stuff in the store on special. We got a raffle going again. Kind of as a bonus, anyone use neem oil? Anyone neem oil users in here? So this is the same thing I use around our place, because we don't use any chemicals anymore. There's nothing wrong with this neem oil. It's on special in there if you want to grab what's left. We changed packages on this label, so I'm trying to just got a few bottles. There's nothing wrong with it because I got a new bottle coming in to replace it, and we don't want to have both on there. It's confusing. So this is the same quality. Sold this for like 30 years myself. I have it at my house, and this is exactly what I use here on our roses as well. But it's good on a lot of bugs, diseases. So trigger spray and those two labels right there on discount up there. I think it's at 20%. I'm pretty sure at the register too. But if you need to stack up a little neem oil, that's a great spray to use for bug and disease, especially if you're a natural gardener. Yes?
Cutting back woody lavender.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Will it come
So
back?
it's a great question because I would always ask this as my first one. If it doesn't come back, are you cool with replacing it?
It's not mine, so.
Okay. Because I would always try to cut it back before I got the shovel out and threw it away and went and spent money. I don't know how bad it is. It's a great time to try. Typically, I tell people coming out of winter, if you've got old lavender you forgot to touch for a few years, cut it down to the nubs, cross the fingers, put a little food on it. It usually comes back. If it doesn't, now you know the problem with lavender is when we get it replaced with one. Get English, don't buy Spanish, please, but get English or French lavender. And now we just do that once or twice a year, and we got a tight plan. Yeah. Yes.
Do you always fertilize right after pruning? Is that the?
I would say it's a good habit to get into. I mean, it's going to help you. You know, if I just put food down 2 weeks ago on something, I'm not going to feed it again. But typically this time of year, the heavy feeders in the summer, the roses, hydrangeas, all that stuff, absolutely. If you do a little bit of once every 6 weeks, you're going to maximize your flower for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What do you feed hydrangeas?
Well, that's a great question. Hydrangea feeding, we could go 2 different ways. So it's not going to change. The color is always on your pH. I don't know if you play with blue, purple, pink, red. So if I'm trying to keep mine pink or red, I'm probably not going to go for roadie food or something that's acidic. I'm going to use a rose and flower food's the way to go. It's a little pink bag in there, all organic. If I am trying to go blue-purple, roadie food's great. Rose and flower is not going to change your pH. There's quite a few. You can almost put anything on a hydrangea. At my house, it's rose and flower food. I do it coming out of winter. I just did mine last week again, once in early summer. And then I sometimes will supplement with some of our sea-grow, so liquid kind of hybrid organic synthetic, because I want to, again, maximize the flower hair and keep it looking sharp over the summer. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming in. Hopefully you got a couple of good pruning tips. We do this pruning thing like 3 times a year, so we try to cover the basics each time. But you'll see one coming up like mid-November. It'll be very heavy on stuff that we would take care of going into winter through the dormant season. And then the other one is going to be in mid-January. That one is in the dead of the winter, and we tend to do a lot of fruit, in particular fruit, berries, and some things kind of heading into that bloom time for early spring as well. So, okay, so hopefully you have the handout, do a little shopping. I'm going to clean up my mess here.